in the heart of medieval Germany, in an age when the world was veiled in fear and faith was bound to stone, a child was born whose soul carried the sound of another realm. Her name was Hildegard, and from the first breath, she drew beneath the dark rafters of her family's home. She was touched by a strange and luminous fire. She saw light where others saw only walls. She heard songs when the air was still. The world called it imagination. Heaven called it calling. The year was 1098, and Europe trembled beneath crusades and plagues. Yet amid the noise of war and the silence of monasteries, something divine stirred within the fragile body of a girl. She was the 10th child of noble birth, offered to God before she could speak. At the age of 8, she was sent to the convent at Disibodenberg, where she was sealed within stone walls to live in enclosure with Jutta of Sponheim, a holy woman who became her mentor. The world outside faded. Her universe became a narrow cell, a small window, a crucifix, and the endless voice that sang inside her. She did not understand it at first. The visions came as floods of color, bursts of living light that spoke in symbols beyond words. She saw fire encircling the cosmos, rivers of gold flowing through angels, and a wheel turning forever in the heart of God. Sometimes she would fall to the floor, trembling, overwhelmed by the brilliance, yet always she rose again with a strange peace. She learned that revelation is not comfort, but responsibility. For years she kept her visions secret, fearing accusation of madness or pride. Only when her body began to fail from the weight of silence did she confess them to her confessor, the monk Volmar. He listened with awe and wrote her words upon parchment, realizing that this hidden woman was seeing what prophets had seen, the world illuminated from within. "I saw a light," she said, "so great and so brilliant that my soul trembled. It was not of the sun or moon, but a living light that kindled my heart like flame." Her writings grew into a book called Civius, meaning know the ways, a map of the divine order revealed through visions. But Hildegard was not content to remain voiceless. When God commands, silence becomes disobedience. At 42, she stepped beyond the walls and spoke to the world. She preached to bishops, abbots, and even emperors, her words carrying the clarity of thunder. She told them that the church had grown sick with pride, and that the Spirit still spoke through the humble and the hidden. Men doubted, but none could deny the authority in her gaze. They said her eyes burned with the reflection of what she had seen. She spoke of Viriditas, the greening power of God that renews all creation. To her, every leaf was a syllable of the divine language. She saw nature not as backdrop, but as revelation, the living garment of the Creator. When she walked through fields, she felt the pulse of heaven beneath her feet. "Every creature," she wrote, "is a glittering, glistening mirror of divinity." Her visions were not static. They sang. She heard harmonies weaving through light, choirs of angels echoing across creation. Music was to her the purest form of praise, the bridge between earth and eternity. She began to compose, and her songs, melodies of haunting beauty, were unlike anything the world had known. They rose like incense, shimmering between plainchant and ecstasy. Each note seemed to open a window in the soul. The nuns who sang with her wept, for they felt heaven leaning near. Hildegard said the music was not hers, but God's breath made audible. In those moments, she felt creation itself humming in unison. The wind, the stars, the beating heart. She called it Symphonia, the symphony of all living things praising the Creator. Her convent became a beacon of light, where art, healing, and contemplation merged. She studied herbs and medicine, treating the sick with both knowledge and compassion. believing that the body and soul are one instrument tuned by love. Her remedies healed not only flesh, but fear. She wrote of balance, of humors, of temperaments, of the need to live in harmony with the rhythm of the world. For Hildegard, sin was dissonance, virtue was harmony. In her theology, beauty was not ornament, but evidence of truth. To know God was to perceive the hidden harmony within chaos. The more she saw of heaven, the more she longed to heal the earth. Yet she was no dreamer detached from pain. She knew corruption, ambition, and cruelty. She wrote to emperors with boldness, reminding them that power without humility is disease. She chastised bishops for silencing women and selling grace for gold. Her letters burned like fire, but her words were medicine. The Spirit, she said, is not confined to the learned, but blows where it wills. And so she became a prophet of renewal, a woman who dared to sing when the world expected silence. Her visions multiplied, wheels of flame, gardens of light, and a shining figure she called the living light, who told her, "I am the life that burns in every breath." She knew this voice was the same that spoke through Moses and Mary, yet she remained humble, calling herself a feather on the breath of God. As her fame spread across Europe, pilgrims came to hear her words, to seek healing, or simply to witness the strange calm that surrounded her presence. She built her own abbey on the hills of Rupertsberg near the Rhine, overlooking a valley that shimmered with morning mist. There she led her sisters, not as a ruler, but as a conductor leads a choir, each voice blending into the next until the air itself seemed to sing. Her days were woven of prayer, study, and song. At dawn, she walked through the gardens she had planted, rows of lavender, rosemary, sage, and healing herbs, her fingers brushing against the leaves as though blessing them. She believed that every plant had a soul sound, a vibration of divine praise, and that to tend the earth was to join its eternal hymn. When her nuns fell ill or weary, she would sing over them softly, her voice trembling but pure, and many said their pain eased before the final note faded. Her music spread beyond the convent walls, carried by traveling monks who copied her songs onto parchment. Soon, cathedrals echoed with melodies that bore her name. It was said that when her compositions were sung, the air seemed to shimmer with unseen colors. The church, at first skeptical, began to revere her as a prophetess. Popes and princes sought her counsel, yet she remained uncorrupted by flattery. She spoke to them as she would to any soul, reminding them that they too were made of the same clay and called to the same light. In her letters, she warned of wars born of greed and hearts hardened by intellect without compassion. "The world is encircled by the embrace of God," she wrote, "and within that embrace, nothing can truly perish." She saw humanity not as fallen beyond hope, but as an unfinished song still yearning for resolution. Her theology was not built of argument, but of vision, a harmony in which the divine feminine and masculine dance in eternal balance, where creation itself is the body of God. To those who dismissed her as fanciful, she replied that truth must be beautiful, for beauty is the garment of wisdom. And those who listened heard the universe begin to sing again. In her later years, her body became frail, but her visions blazed brighter than ever. At night, she would awaken to find her cell filled with radiance, and she would dictate to her faithful scribes what she saw: great wheels of fire turning in the heavens, rivers of light flowing from the heart of Christ, and a cosmic song resounding through all things. "I heard the living light," she wrote, "and its sound was like the beating of countless wings." These final revelations she called Liber Divinorum Operum, the Book of Divine Works, a synthesis of her entire life's vision, where theology, science, and poetry meet in a single act of praise. She described creation as music made visible, an unending symphony in which each soul is an instrument. The angels, she said, are choirs singing the architecture of reality. The stars are notes written upon the sky. And humanity, though often out of tune, is invited to rejoin the celestial harmony through love. As she grew weaker, she no longer feared death. She had seen too much of eternity to doubt its mercy. Her sisters often found her gazing out the window, smiling at something invisible. When they asked what she saw, she would answer, "The greening light." To her, death was not an end, but the final cadence resolving into the great song. In her last illness, when she could no longer write or sing, she asked that her nuns gather around her bed and chant the hymns she had composed. Their voices rose softly in the candlelit chamber, and as the final notes faded, she whispered, "Remain in harmony." Her eyes closed, and a stillness filled the room like the moment between two heartbeats. They said that when her body was lifted, her face shone with a quiet radiance, as if lit from within. The bells of Rupertsberg tolled, not in mourning, but in awe. Word of her passing spread quickly. Across Europe, her name became legend, the woman who heard the music of heaven. But Hildegard's legacy wasn't in fame, it was in resonance. Her writings crossed centuries, whispering through monasteries, libraries, and hearts. Long after her bones had turned to dust, her voice continued to sing wherever a soul sought meaning beyond noise. Her visions inspired artists, poets, scientists, and mystics alike. Physicians studied her herbal treatises. Composers studied her melodies. Theologians studied her luminous theology of creation. She became known as the Sibyl of the Rhine, the prophet of divine harmony. Even in the modern world, where faith is often traded for distraction, her music returns like dawn. Recordings of her chants echo through glass cathedrals and quiet headphones alike, carrying the same light that once burned in her cell. In an age of fragmentation, she teaches wholeness. In a time of noise, she teaches the sacred art of listening. Her voice reminds the weary that the universe itself is a song of love waiting to be heard. 600 years after her death, the Church canonized her as a saint, and later named her a Doctor of the Church, placing her among the greatest minds of Christian history. Yet she would have smiled at the title, for she had always said that wisdom is not achieved, but received. "I am," she once wrote, "a feather on the breath of God." And indeed, her life was a feather carried by that breath, a life lifted by the invisible wind of the Spirit, a soul attuned to the rhythm of creation. If one listens closely, even now, in the hush between two moments, one might hear it. The faint echo of her song, the golden cord that runs through everything, binding galaxies to grass blades, tears to stars, flesh to spirit. The music of heaven has never ceased. It moves through time, through pain, through love, calling each of us back into tune. And somewhere beyond sight, Saint Hildegard still listens, smiling as the great harmony swells and the Creator's heart continues to sing through all that lives. For the music of heaven, once heard, is never lost. It is the very sound of love itself.